Welcome back to my channel. I'm Joe with Smokin Joe's Pit Barbecue. On today's video, I'm going to be smoking a brisket overnight on my Yoder YS 1500. Stay tuned. Alright, so let's get started on this overnight brisket cook. I'm starting with a 15-pound USDA prime brisket. As you can see, this is a whole packer brisket, so I got some trimming to do. You guys that have been watching my videos know that I like to start by simply removing this decal. Just like that. Got a little bit more right here. Somebody had asked me one time in the comments if I save this oxidized meat off the brisket to make sausage. I don't. Okay, I normally trim it afterwards, but I'm going to go ahead and trim this right now since I'm not going to use it. See this piece of meat right here? So I just throw that in the trash. As far as everything else, it looks good. So from here on out, I will save every last piece of the trimming. I like to remove some of the silver skin and fat off the top of the brisket. Now you don't have to take all this fat and silver skin off the top of the brisket, but if you do have some bigger pockets like these right here, just take them right down. You don't have to take all the silver skin off. So one thing that'll help you when you trim a brisket is just put your hand on the bottom, stick your fingers on there, and lift up that meat a little bit. Makes it a little easier to trim. See that? All right, so that's it on the top of the brisket, real quick and simple. Now this is a little thin right here, so I will be trimming this in a bit. On this side, I'm going to clean up this edge and remove quite a bit of this fat right here. Round off your point. Remember, you want your briskets as aerodynamic as possible. So one thing that I'm planning on doing is smoking a brisket without trimming it, just to show you what happens to a brisket when you smoke it and don't trim it aerodynamically, don't trim the fat enough, etc. I think that should be a fun cook. All right, so this edge looks good. This side, I've got to round it off and trim off some of that real thin edge here. And I got to sharpen this knife. And I'm also going to round off this edge right here. Just kind of follow it. Start right here and round it off. All right, that looks good. Let's trim up this fat cap. All right, so there are two types of brisket trimmers. Those that love to leave this mohawk on because this is really good meat. And those of us that make sausage that don't mind taking this mohawk all the way down. Just lay your knife flat and simply remove the mohawk. So on this side of the mohawk, you do have this really heavy layer of fat, okay? And I like to trim that down quite a bit as well. All right, so I am switching knives because my dowel strong needs to be sharpened. So we've got about ½ an inch of fat here. So I'm just going to take this down just a bit. All right, so this brisket is looking good. Got it all trimmed up. Got about ½ an inch of the fat cap on there. This is looking mighty fine. So on this cook, I am not going to use a binder. I'm just going to use my homemade SPG. which has salt, pepper, garlic, paprika, and also a little bit of cumin. If you guys want the recipe to my SPG mix, check out the link below and give it a shot. Pat that rub down. And don't forget to get your edges. So these overnight brisket cooks are fantastic if you don't want to sit next to your offset smoker like I do sometimes. Now, I don't cook overnight usually, but sometimes you just need to cook a brisket overnight for a lunch party, or maybe you're hosting the big game, etc. You don't want to stay up all night. You want to have energy to entertain your guest. This is the perfect time to smoke an overnight brisket. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be smoking this on my Yoder YS 1500, and that is a bark building machine. And you guys will see that towards the end of this cook. All right, so it's 7 p.m. on a Saturday evening. I don't plan on putting this brisket inside my smoker until 10 p.m. So I've got about 3 hours. I'm gonna pop this in my fridge, let it stay nice and cool. I'll fire up my Yoder YS 1500 and I'll bring you guys right back. All right, so it's 10 p.m. Got my Yoder YS 1500 fired up and running at 225 degrees. Let's load up this brisket. All right, so I'm placing this brisket on the top shelf with a point towards that fire pot, just like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and use my probe for this cook. I don't normally use a probe, but for this cook, I do wanna monitor the temperature. So right inside the point. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and close the door. I will not be opening this smoker until about 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. See you then. All right, so it's the very next morning and 9 hours later, and I do wanna show you guys the brisket, but I do wanna talk about a few things just in case you guys wanna do this overnight no wrap cook. So if you guys are planning on doing an overnight no wrap cook like I did on this brisket right here, just make sure your hopper is completely filled and make sure you have some pellets on standby. Now, we cooked at 225 degrees, so that's why I only used half a hopper of pellets. If you're gonna cook at a higher temperature, you will use a little bit more pellets than what I did, but again, I only used half a hopper full of pellets. All right, so one last thing that I do want to talk about before I show you guys this brisket is getting your smoker prepared for an overnight cook. Make sure your fire pot is completely cleaned out and vacuum out all the ashes off the bottom of your smoker. Remember, one of the nice things about using a pellet smoker to do an overnight cook like this is that you don't have to mess with it, but you do have to get your smoker ready. So the best advice that I could give anybody that owns a pellet smoker is make sure that you clean it out before you use it on any cook. Your fire pot, and again, vacuum out all the ashes. Just like you guys change your underwear daily, make sure you clean out your pellet smoker before you start to use it. All right, you guys have waited long enough. Let's take a look at this brisket. Again, 9 hours. Oh my goodness. All right, we've got that morning sunshine shining all over this brisket, but as you can see, we got some really nice bark. I never spritz this brisket. It's looking good. In fact, the probe is showing that the brisket is 200 degrees. So I'm gonna check for tenderness and see where we're at. All right, that's still a little tough right here on the flat. Ooh, that point is like butter. But you know what? I'd like to get this flat a little bit more tender. I'm sitting at 193 degrees on the flat. And that point is 197-ish. All right, so we're at the 9-hour mark, as I mentioned earlier. I'm gonna let this go a little bit longer. Once I pull it off, I'll let you guys know exactly how long that takes, and I will be letting this brisket rest for at least 2 hours before I slice into it. Stay tuned. All right, so the brisket is ready, and the total cook time was 10 hours. That got the flat nice and tender, and it has been resting for a couple of hours. Let's see how we did. Smells delicious, by the way. Look at that. Beautiful looking brisket, nice soft bark. Got a little bit of tallow here. All right, so I'm gonna slice up the entire brisket and then we will give it a try and see how we did. All right, so this brisket is slicing really nice. It's nice and tender and it's juicy. Did get a little crispy on the bottom, but that's okay. All right, so I'm gonna turn the point You get some nice slices in this direction. Ooh, it's still really warm. Man, this brisket is really tender and it's still really warm, even after resting for 2 hours. And that, folks, is how you slice up a brisket. Check that out. Looking mighty fine. All right, let's see how we did on our slices here. Oh man, it's tender. Look at that, it's falling apart. Really tender. Check out that smoke ring. Really nice and juicy. Hopefully you guys can pick that up on the camera. But it is tender. Check that out. Good looking brisket. Again, it got a little crispy on the bottom, but I'm okay with that. Still a fantastic looking brisket. Our point is just as juicy. Check that out. Ooh, man, this is still really hot. I gotta tell you, for a pellet smoker, that YS 1500 does an amazing job on brisket. Look at that bark. Yes, sir. Let's give it a taste. All right, let's give our overnight no wrap brisket a try. Check that out. That fat has rendered nicely. Got a nice yellow color. Man, that YS 1500 is a savage smoker. Here we go. Man, this brisket is so good. I'm not saying it's offset smoker style good, but it is very close. This is fantastic. Let's do that pull test. Look at that. Falls right apart. Let's give this point meat a try and see how we did. Just rip a nice chunk off here. Look at that bark. I'm telling you guys, that YS 1500 is a bark building machine. Check that out. So good. All right, so I'm gonna give this brisket a 9.5 out of 10. And the only reason is because the bottom got a little bit crispy on me, but it's still a fantastic tasting brisket. I gotta tell you, if you all have never done an overnight, no wrap brisket, you have got to give it a shot. I hope you guys enjoyed this brisket video. If this is your first time to my channel, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up. Until next time, Joe with Smokin Joe's Pit BBQ. See ya.